Hi everyone, we're continuing to work on adding and subtracting rational expressions. So remember, for any addition subtraction, you're trying to make like terms. With fractions, the denominators are what determines whether it's like or unlike. So we're dealing with pieces of a whole, and the denominator tells us how big those pieces are, and if they're not the same size, then they're not like terms. So these are definitely not the same size. The denominators are different. If we want to make them the same, we have to find an LCD. And to do that, we have to get them factored. So you're going to get tons of factoring practice here. So they're both two terms, which means my choices are either factor out a greatest common factor, which I should always try first, or difference of squares. The first one does not have a greatest common factor, but it is a difference of squares. We could think about that as 2 squared and w squared. So 2 times w is all squared minus 1 squared, which means it splits up into a 2w plus 1, 2w minus 1. The second one does have a common factor of 2, so I can factor that out, and I get 1 minus 2w, which is fully factored. But if I'm trying to build an LCD, something I notice is that I have a 2w minus 1 and a 1 minus 2w. When both signs are switched like that, you can factor out a -1 to make them match up. So I'm going to go one more step and say, well, if I make that a -2, then this will switch to -1 plus 2w, which is the same as 2w minus 1. So when I go to build my LCD, I'm going to need everything from the first fraction. Your LCD has to contain every factor in either fraction. So we'll start with just writing down what we need for the first one. And then the trick to it is only writing what you don't already have from the second one. So we already have the 2w minus 1. Really all we need is that minus 2. I'm going to sneak it out in front. That's my LCD. Okay, so back to the fractions we're working on. The first one already has most of that. The only thing it's missing is a -2. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply top and bottom by -2. And since that's a pretty easy multiplication, I'm just going to sneak it right in. Hopefully that's okay. 2w minus 1. For the second fraction, I'm missing let's see, 2w plus 1. So here, we'll see if it's okay here as well. So I'm going to multiply the top by 2w plus 1. You can write a separate fraction, but hopefully as you get comfortable, you can see it's just going to insert that. Let's see, w minus 1, w plus 1. Okay, so we want to make sure we have a common denominator, and we do, even though I wrote that one wrong, 2w minus 1. I wrote both of them wrong, 2w plus 1. Okay, so order doesn't matter. Those are factors. Multiplication can be rearranged. They do have all the same factors, which means I should be good to continue. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute through here. And I can also combine these. Ooh, in fact, I'm going to save it for a step because I'm noticing you have to be really careful with subtraction. 2w plus 1. If I'm not careful, that minus sign won't get distributed through. So when you're adding, it's not really a big deal. But when you're subtracting, be very, very careful that you subtract everything in that second fraction. So I see, now I'll go ahead and distribute the -3. I see -2w minus 6w minus 3 over -2 times 2w plus 1 times 2w minus 1. And I have some like terms on the top. So let's see, -2w. So I have -8w minus 3 over -2 times 2w plus 1, 2w minus 1. And this is a good answer. Personally, I don't really like the extra negative sign floating around on the bottom. It's not that there's something horribly wrong about that, but we just generally don't leave those. But be careful if you're going to cancel it, because to do it, you would have to factor this minus sign out of the top. So you'd have to, I'm going to switch colors so you can see what I'm doing. you would have to say, okay, if I factor out the -1, I get positive 8W, and I also get positive 3. Oh man, my dog's going to help right now. Okay, so we can cancel those signs. So final answer, I'm going to move over to this other side. 8W plus 3 over 2 times, sorry everyone, 2W plus 1 times 2W minus 1. Okay, with lots of help from the dog, I think that's a great final answer. Thanks for watching.